HOA. Claims my private lake is public, so I build a moat to prove a point. This is the story of how my peaceful lakefront property turned into a battleground with entitled neighbors, and how I had to get creative to protect what's rightfully mine. My wife and I bought our dream home 5 years ago, a beautiful house on 12 acres with a private 3-acre lake. The previous owner had it built in the 1970s as a fishing and swimming spot for his family. When we purchased the property, we made sure everything was properly documented. The lake was included in our deed, we had all the permits, and we even got it surveyed to confirm the boundaries. For the first 3 years, life was perfect. We'd spend weekends fishing, swimming, or just sitting on our deck watching the sunset over the water. We even stocked the lake with bass and built a small dock. The only neighbors we had to deal with were the houses in a small development about a quarter-mile down the road. That all changed when the development decided to form an HOA. At first, we didn't think it would affect us since we weren't part of their neighborhood. But oh boy, were we wrong. It started with random people showing up to use our lake. I'd come home from work to find families having picnics on our property or kids swimming off our dock. When I'd politely explain this was private property, they'd all say the same thing. The HOA said this was a community lake that everyone could use. I was confused, so I called the HOA office to straighten things out. The woman who answered, their board president, told me something that made my blood boil. "Oh yes," she said in this condescending tone, "since your lake is visible from some of our properties and affects our property values, we've designated it as a community amenity. We've already added it to our marketing materials." I nearly choked. "Excuse me? This is my private property. You can't just designate it as anything." "Well," she replied, "we've already informed all residents they have access rights. If you try to prevent them from using the lake, we'll take legal action." I immediately called my lawyer, who was equally baffled by their claim. He sent them a cease and desist letter, explaining in very clear terms that the lake was private property and they needed to stop telling people they could use it. Their response? They actually sued me, claiming the lake should be considered a public waterway since it affected the character of the neighborhood. They tried arguing that since rainwater helped fill the lake, it should be public property. My lawyer was practically giddy when he saw their lawsuit. "This is the most ridiculous case I've seen in years," he said. "They have absolutely no legal standing." We countersued for harassment and filed for an immediate injunction to keep them off our property while the case was pending. The judge granted it, but the HOA ignored it completely. People kept coming to use the lake, and when I'd confront them, they'd wave printed HOA newsletters that listed the lake as a community feature. That's when I decided to get creative. If they wanted to ignore the legal system, I'd give them a lesson they couldn't ignore. I hired a contractor to build what I called my landscaping project. First, we installed a serious security fence around the entire property, 8 feet tall with reinforced gates and security cameras. But here's where it gets good. We also dug a 10-foot wide, 6-foot deep trench around the entire lake, about 20 feet back from the shoreline. Essentially, I built a moat around my lake. We filled it with water and added some decorative bridges to access the lake area. The bridges had locked gates that only we could open. When the HOA complained about the unsightly ditch, I explained it was a water feature to enhance the natural beauty of the property. I even stocked it with koi fish to make it look more decorative. The HOA lost their minds. They sent their compliance officer to take pictures, but he couldn't get close enough because of the moat. They tried sending violation notices about unauthorized construction, but since we weren't in their HOA, we just used them as kindling for our fire pit. The best part came when they tried to argue in court that my moat was a safety hazard. My lawyer pointed out that if they were worried about people falling into the moat, they were essentially admitting they were planning to trespass on my property. The judge was not amused by their argument. The court case dragged on for months, but it was worth every penny. The HOA's lawyer looked increasingly uncomfortable every time we presented evidence of their harassment and attempts to steal my property rights. The final straw came when we showed the judge their marketing materials, which literally advertised community lake access with photos of my lake. The judge's ruling was beautiful. Not only did she throw out their lawsuit, but she granted our countersuit and ordered the HOA to pay all our legal fees, required them to send a retraction to every resident, imposed a $10,000 fine for false advertising, granted a permanent injunction barring them from claiming any rights to our property. The HOA president was forced to resign after it came out that she had been using HOA funds to pay for their frivolous lawsuit without board approval. Several board members followed her out the door when residents learned how much money they'd wasted on legal fees. But the story doesn't end there. After their humiliating defeat, the HOA tried one last desperate move. They attempted to report my moat to the county as an unauthorized water feature. The county inspector came out, and I showed him all my permits and documentation. He not only approved the moat, but commended us on our innovative approach to property security. These days, our property is peaceful again. The moat has actually attracted all sorts of wildlife. We have ducks, herons, and those koi fish have grown huge. The security cameras have caught a few would-be trespassers trying to figure out how to cross the moat, but most people have gotten the message. The best part? Our property value has actually increased because of all the water features. Meanwhile, the HOA had to raise their dues to cover the legal fees and fines, causing several residents to sell their homes and move away. I know some people think I went overboard with the moat, but sometimes you have to go to extreme measures to protect what's yours. The HOA learned a valuable lesson about trying to steal someone's property, and I got a pretty cool medieval-style security system out of the deal. Would I do it all again? Absolutely. Though next time I might add a drawbridge just for fun. Edit. Wow, this blew up. Thanks for all the support. To answer some common questions. 1. Yes, the moat is totally legal. We got all proper permits and it's fully up to code. 2. The lawsuit cost us about $30,000. But the HOA had to reimburse every penny. 3. The ex-HOA president did try to apologize, but only after she was forced to resign. 4. Several people have asked for pictures, but for privacy reasons I'd rather not share them. 5. My wife thinks the moat is hilarious and has started calling our house the castle. Edit 2. The HOA has been oddly quiet lately. I heard they're having trouble finding anyone willing to serve on the board after this debacle. Turns out people don't want to risk getting sued for harassing their neighbors. Who knew? Update, 6 months later. The Moat saga continues. Hey everyone, Ope here, with an update about the lake/moat situation. A lot has happened since my last post, and I think you'll enjoy how this all played out. Remember the ex-HOA president who tried to steal my lake? Well, she didn't go quietly into the night like we'd hoped. About a month after my last post, she started a Facebook group called Lake Access for All and tried to rally support from the wider community. She posted edited photos of my property that made the moat look like some kind of dangerous swamp, claiming I was destroying natural habitat and endangering children. I ignored it at first, but then she crossed a line. She actually hired someone to fly a drone over my property taking videos, which she posted online with captions like, "Local landowner builds dangerous moat to keep children from swimming," and "Why is he hiding behind these walls?" My lawyer was thrilled to have more evidence of harassment. We filed for a restraining order, which the judge granted immediately. The judge also ordered her to take down all social media posts about my property and banned her from posting about it in the future. But here's where it gets really interesting. Remember those koi fish I put in the moat? Turns out they're pretty expensive, and when the ex-president's drone spooked them, several died from stress. My security cameras caught the whole thing. The judge was not happy when we showed her the footage of the drone harassing protected ornamental fish. Yes, there are actually laws about that. The ex-president got slapped with another fine, this time for animal cruelty and violation of drone regulations. She tried to argue that she didn't know the fish were there, but the judge pointed out that she'd literally posted close-up drone footage of them on Facebook. But karma wasn't done with her yet. The new HOA board, trying to clean up the mess she'd left, did an audit of all their finances during her tenure. Guess what they found? She'd been using HOA funds to pay for personal expenses, including her legal fees from our original lawsuit. The board is now suing her for misappropriation of funds. The best part? Some of the homeowners who got those fake lake access promises when they bought their houses are now suing the real estate company that sold them their homes. Turns out the ex-president was getting kickbacks from the realtor for every house sold using the lake access marketing materials. As for my property, things have actually improved a lot. The Moat has become a local attraction, for all the right reasons. A university environmental science professor asked if his students could study the ecosystem we've accidentally created. Apparently, the combination of the moat and lake has attracted several species of rare birds. We've got herons nesting near the water, and all sorts of interesting wildlife. The County Environmental Board even gave us an award for innovative wildlife habitat creation. The irony of getting an award for something I built out of spite is not lost on me. The new HOA board is actually pretty reasonable. They approached me professionally about setting up a proper agreement for organized community events. We worked out a deal where they can host 2 supervised community fishing days per year, with proper insurance and signed waivers. In return, they helped maintain the road leading to my property and contributed to our wildlife preservation efforts. Remember those security cameras we installed? They've caught some hilarious moments. My favorite was when the ex-president tried to convince a local news crew to come film the dangerous conditions at my property. She was standing by my front gate, dramatically pointing at the moat, when one of the decorative fountains we'd installed started up and soaked her designer outfit. The news crew decided there wasn't much of a story, but my wife and I enjoy re-watching that security footage on bad days. We've made some improvements to the property too. Added some nice lighting around the moat and lake, put in a few more fountains, and built a proper boathouse. The property value has gone up so much that some developers offered to buy us out, but we're not interested. This is our home, moat and all. The ex-president finally moved away last month. I heard she bought a condo in Florida. No lakes or HOAs involved. The Lake Access for All Facebook group has been quiet since she left, though someone did rename it to How Not to Run an HOA, and now uses it to share stories about HOA overreach. My wife still calls our place the Castle, but she's upgraded it to the Wildlife Sanctuary Castle now. We're thinking about hosting educational tours for local schools to learn about lake ecosystems. Might as well use this whole situation to do some good, right? Oh, and remember that county inspector who approved our moat? He retired last month and sent us a letter saying our case was his favorite in 30 years of work. He included some old photos of other weird property disputes he'd dealt with, but said nothing quite compared to our moat. So that's where things stand now. The lake is safe, the wildlife is thriving, and the HOA learned a valuable lesson about respecting property rights. Plus, I've got a pretty cool story to tell at parties. And yes, I did eventually install that drawbridge I mentioned. It's mostly decorative, but it makes me smile every time I use it. Final edit. Thanks for all the awards and support. A lot of you have asked if we're worried about future HOA issues. Honestly, not really. The new board actually uses our case as a training example of what not to do. Plus, it's hard to argue with a moat. Sometimes the best defense really is a good moat fence. P.S. The koi fish are doing great now. They've had babies, so the moat is fuller than ever. We named the biggest one Karen. It's the grumpiest fish we've ever seen. Final update. 1 year later, justice served and property protected. Hey everyone, Oape, here with what will probably be my final update on the lake situation. A lot of you have been messaging me asking how things turned out with the lawsuits and property disputes, so I figured I should let you know what's happened since my last post. First, the legal stuff. The criminal case against the former HOA president for misappropriation of funds finally wrapped up last month. She ended up pleading guilty to 3 counts of financial fraud. The court ordered her to pay back $127,000 to the HOA, and she got 2 years of probation. Turns out she'd been skimming money from their accounts for years, not just for the lake lawsuit. The homeowner's lawsuit against the real estate company also settled. The company had to refund a portion of the purchase price to anyone who could prove they bought their house based on the false lake access promises. About 20 families got checks for around $15,000 each. The realtor who worked with the ex-president lost their license over it. My lawyer called me last week with some good news. The county has officially recorded new property documents that specifically exclude my land from any future HOA claims. Basically, they added extra legal protection to make sure no one can try this nonsense again. Cost me $2,500 in filing fees, but worth every penny for the peace of mind. The new HOA board has been keeping their distance, which is exactly how I like it. They did send an official letter apologizing for their predecessor's actions and acknowledging that they have zero rights to my property. I kept that letter framed in my office just in case. Some of you asked about the ex-president's social media crusade. Well, after she violated the restraining order by making fake profiles to post about my property, the judge held her in contempt. She had to pay another $5,000 fine and do 100 hours of community service. Last I heard, she's been picking up trash along the highway, probably not what she expected when she started this whole mess. The Moat is still doing its job perfectly. We had a few people try to sneak in during the summer, but the security cameras and fence stopped them cold. One guy actually tried to bring a small inflatable raft across the Moat. I couldn't make this stuff up if I tried. He gave up when he realized how stupid he looked on camera. I've gotten calls from 3 different TV shows wanting to feature our property on their home improvement or real estate programs. I turned them all down. This was never about getting attention. It was about protecting what's rightfully mine. The wildlife preserve angle has worked out great though. We got official certification as a protected habitat last month. This means even if some future HOA tried to mess with us, they'd have to deal with state environmental regulations too. The university students studying our property helped push that through. A few people have asked if I regret going nuclear with the Moat and legal battles. Honestly, not one bit. Sometimes you have to take a firm stand to protect your rights. If I'd tried to compromise or play nice, I'd probably still be dealing with trespassers and entitled HOA board members trying to steal my property. The total cost for everything, the Moat, legal fees, security system, and new property documents, came to about $175,000. But between the lawsuit settlements, fines the ex-president had to pay us, and the increase in our property value, we've actually come out ahead financially. More importantly, we've got our peace and privacy back. My wife started teaching swimming lessons in our lake to kids from non-HOA families. We make sure everyone signs proper waivers and carries insurance. It's nice to share the lake on our own terms with people who respect our property rights. Remember that county inspector who approved our Moat? He's actually become a good friend. Had him over for a barbecue last weekend and he brought his grandkids fishing. Turns out he dealt with the ex-president before at his previous job. Said she tried to claim ownership of someone else's garden too. Guess some people never learn. So that's where things stand now. Our property is legally protected, the troublemakers have faced real consequences, and we can finally just enjoy our home without drama. The Moat looks better than ever. Those koi fish have taken over and turned it into their own little kingdom. I've had a few people ask if I'd do anything differently. Honestly, the only thing I'd change is taking action sooner. I should have shut down the HOA's nonsense the first time they claimed rights to my property. Lesson learned. Don't let entitled people push you around, not even a little bit. Looks like this is probably my last update, unless something crazy happens. Thanks for all the support and advice over the past year. Remember folks, document everything, know your rights, and don't be afraid to build a moat if you have to. Sometimes the best way to deal with unreasonable people is to put up clear boundaries, in my case, very wet ones. Edit. For those asking, yes, we still use the drawbridge every day. No, We haven't added alligators to the moat, though I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought about it. Final edit. Just got word that our case is being used in a property law class at the local university as an example of HOA overreach and property rights. Guess some good came out of all this mess after all.